The rattling stagecoach wheels kicked up dust that glittered like gold in the dying light of an Arizona sunset as Rachel Holloway clutched her valise with white-knuckled fingers, knowing she had made a terrible mistake. The year was 1875, and the promise of a teaching position in Willow Creek had lured her from the comforts of Boston society. But 3 days in this desolate territory had already shown her how ill-prepared she was for frontier life. When the stagecoach finally lurched to a stop in front of what passed for Willow Creek's Main Street, Rachel stared through the window at the row of wooden buildings, most seemingly held together by nothing more than stubbornness and sun-baked nails. A single church spire rose above the dusty landscape, its white paint peeling from years of harsh desert sun. "Last stop, miss," the driver called, swinging down to open the door. "Willow Creek." Rachel stepped down, her boots landing in 2 inches of dust. The heat was oppressive even as evening approached, so different from the cool Atlantic breezes she had known all her 22 years. She adjusted her blue traveling dress, painfully aware it was completely unsuitable for this environment. "You must be our new schoolteacher," a portly man called, hurrying toward her. "Walter Gibbs, mayor of Willow Creek. We've been expecting you, Miss Holloway." "Yes, that's me," Rachel said, offering a tight smile. "I'm pleased to be here." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. Mayor Gibbs led her toward a 2-story building with a faded sign declaring it the Willow Creek Hotel. "You'll stay here until we get you settled in the schoolhouse. Term starts in 2 weeks." 2 weeks. Rachel wondered if she could survive 2 days in this place. The hotel room was Spartan but clean, a narrow bed, washstand, and a small window overlooking the dusty Main Street. Rachel sat heavily on the edge of the bed after the mayor departed, letting her composure crumble. What had she done? Her parents had been so proud when she'd secured this position, seeing it as an adventure for their bookish daughter. They couldn't have known that the thriving community described in the correspondence was barely more than a collection of buildings clinging to survival in the harsh desert. She dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief and crossed to the window. Night had fallen quickly, as it seemed to do in the desert, but lanterns illuminated the street below. A group of men spilled from what was clearly the town saloon, their laughter rising up to her window. Among them was a tall figure who moved with an easy grace that drew her eye. He wore a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, and even from a distance, she could see the glint of a star on his chest, the town's lawman, perhaps. As though sensing her gaze, he looked up toward her window. Rachel stepped back, embarrassed to be caught watching, but not before she glimpsed a face both handsome and weathered by the elements. She slept poorly that night, plagued by dreams of endless desert and the feeling of being hopelessly lost. When dawn broke, Rachel had already made up her mind. She would write to the school board in Boston, explaining her mistake. Surely they would understand that she wasn't suited for this life. Rachel dressed in her simplest gown and made her way downstairs to the hotel's small dining room. A few early risers nodded politely in her direction, curious about the newcomer. "Coffee, miss?" asked a young woman with a pot in hand. "Yes, please," Rachel said gratefully, "and perhaps some information. I need to send a telegram to Boston. Is there an office in town?" "At the Mercantile," the woman replied. "Young Mr. Fletcher runs it along with the store." Rachel thanked her and sipped the strong, bitter coffee. The dining room door swung open, and the tall man she'd seen the previous night entered. In daylight, she could see him clearly broad-shouldered, with a face that spoke of both hardship and kindness. The badge on his chest confirmed her suspicion. He was the town sheriff. His eyes found hers immediately, as though he'd been looking for her. With a slight nod, he made his way to her table. "Mind if I join you, Miss Holloway?" he asked, his voice deep and smooth like aged whiskey. Rachel blinked in surprise. "You know my name. Not much happens in Willow Creek that I don't know about," he said with a small smile. "Sheriff Yates Callahan." He extended a hand. Rachel hesitated before taking it. His palm was calloused and warm against her softer skin. "Rachel Holloway, our new schoolteacher," he said, settling into the chair across from her. How are you finding Willow Creek so far? Rachel considered lying, offering platitudes about the town's charm, but something in the sheriff's direct gaze made her suspect he would see through such falsehoods. To be honest, Sheriff Callahan, I'm finding it rather overwhelming. She traced the rim of her coffee cup with one finger. I'm not sure I'm suited for life out here. Call me Yates, he said, then leaned back as the waitress set a cup of coffee before him. And I figured as much. Saw you at your window last night looking like you'd just realized you'd stepped off the edge of the world. Rachel flushed. It's that obvious, to someone who's watching, he said simply. Most folks who come from back east have that same look when they first arrive. Some never lose it. And do they stay? Those people? Yates took a long sip of his coffee. Some do. Some find something worth staying for. There was something in his gaze that made Rachel's breath catch. She broke eye contact, suddenly flustered. Well, I'm afraid I won't be among them. I intend to send a telegram today informing the school board of my resignation. That would be a shame, Yates said quietly. The children here need education more than most. Makes the difference between a hard life and an impossible one. Rachel felt a twist of guilt. I'm sure they can find someone more suitable. Maybe, Yates conceded, but they've been waiting 6 months for a teacher already. He stood, placing his hat back on his head. Before you send that telegram, Miss Holloway, maybe take a day to see more of Willow Creek than just the main street. Might surprise you. With that, he left a coin on the table and departed, leaving Rachel staring after him, unsettled by both his words and the strange fluttering in her chest when he'd looked at her. Despite her intentions, Rachel found herself following the sheriff's suggestion. After breakfast, she set out to explore the town, telling herself she was merely postponing the inevitable. Willow Creek was larger than her first impression had suggested. Beyond the main street lay neat rows of simple homes, many with small vegetable gardens struggling against the arid climate. The Mercantile was her first stop, a large building filled with every necessity a frontier town might require. The proprietor, Mr. Fletcher, was a friendly man who greeted her warmly. Miss Holloway, we're mighty pleased to have a proper teacher in town at last. My boy Timothy is 10 now and reads better than I do, but there's so much more he could learn with proper schooling. Rachel smiled politely, her resolve weakening slightly at the genuine enthusiasm in his voice. I understand there's a telegraph office here. Yes, madam, right through that door, he pointed. But if you're sending for supplies for the school, the town council's already ordered primers and slates, should arrive on next week's stage. Oh, thank you, Rachel said, suddenly reluctant to reveal her true purpose. She wandered further through town instead of sending her telegram. The small church stood on a slight rise, its simple architecture somehow more dignified up close. Next to it was the schoolhouse, a building larger than she expected, with fresh white paint and a new bell tower. As Rachel approached, she noticed a figure working on the schoolhouse steps. It was Sheriff Callahan, his badge glinting in the sun as he hammered a loose board back into place. Sheriff, she greeted him, shielding her eyes from the sun. I didn't expect to find you here. He looked up, a hint of surprise crossing his features before he smiled. Town's too small to afford specialized labor, Miss Holloway. We all pitch in where needed. Are you repairing the schoolhouse for me? She asked, strangely touched by the thought. For whoever teaches here, he corrected gently. Though I'd prefer it be you. Rachel felt her cheeks warm at his directness. You seem very invested in the school for a lawman. Yates set down his hammer and wiped his brow with a handkerchief. Education is what separates civilization from chaos. Out here, that line gets thin sometimes. He gestured to the schoolhouse door. Would you like to see inside? It's not fancy, but it's solid. Curious despite herself, Rachel nodded. Yates pushed open the door, allowing her to enter first. The schoolroom was simple but surprisingly well appointed. Rows of sturdy desks faced a teacher's desk on a raised platform. Bookshelves, though sparsely filled, lined one wall. Large windows allowed ample light, and a pot-bellied stove stood ready for winter months. It's Nicer than I expected, Rachel admitted, running her fingers along the smooth surface of the teacher's desk. Town's been saving for years, Yates explained. Education matters to folks here even if some of them can barely write their names. Rachel walked to the windows, looking out at the landscape beyond the town. From this vantage point, she could see past Willow Creek to the open desert and mountains beyond. There was an austere beauty to it that she hadn't noticed before. How many students would I have? She asked, surprising herself with the question. 28 at last count, Yates said, moving to stand beside her at the window. Ages 5 to 16, some ride in from ranches as far as 10 miles out. That's quite a range to teach, Rachel murmured, already mentally organizing lessons that might work for such diverse ages. They're good kids, Yates said, eager to learn, especially the older ones who know what they're missing. Rachel turned to look at him, curious about his passion for education. Were you educated, Sheriff Callahan? A shadow passed over his face. More than most out here. My mother was a teacher before she married my father. She taught me to read and appreciate learning. He paused. She died when I was 12, but by then she'd given me enough to keep teaching myself. I'm sorry, Rachel said softly, touched by the personal revelation. Yates nodded his acknowledgement, then gestured toward the door. There's more of the town to see if you're interested. They spent the afternoon walking through Willow Creek, with Yates introducing Rachel to townspeople and explaining the community's history. Founded initially as a mining town 15 years earlier, Willow Creek had survived when others failed because of the reliable spring that gave the town its name. Water's more valuable than gold out here, Yates explained as they walked toward the creek that ran along the town's eastern edge. This spring never runs dry, even in the worst droughts. The creek was lined with willow trees that provided blessed shade. Rachel breathed deeply, enjoying the relative coolness. It's beautiful here. It can be, Yates agreed, if you know where to look. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple, Rachel realized she hadn't sent her telegram. Moreover, she wasn't entirely sure she still wanted to. I should get back to the hotel, she said reluctantly. I'll walk you, Yates offered. They strolled in comfortable silence until they reached the hotel's front porch. Rachel paused, turning to face the sheriff. Thank you for today, she said sincerely. You've given me much to think about. Does that mean you might stay? He asked, his eyes searching hers. Rachel took a deep breath. I'm still not certain I belong here, but perhaps I could try, for a little while at least. Yates smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. That's all anyone can ask. He tipped his hat. Good night, Miss Holloway. Good night, Sheriff, she replied, watching him walk away before entering the hotel, her mind swirling with new possibilities. The next morning, Rachel found herself at the schoolhouse again, this time with a broom in hand. If she was going to teach here, even temporarily, she wanted the room properly prepared. She had just begun sweeping when a hesitant knock sounded at the open door. A woman stood there, perhaps a few years older than Rachel, with a young girl of about 6 clutching her hand. Excuse me, the woman said. Are you Miss Holloway, the new teacher? I am, Rachel confirmed, setting aside her broom. I'm Eliza Tanner, and this is my daughter, Sarah. The woman gently nudged the shy child forward. When we heard the teacher had arrived, Sarah couldn't wait to meet you. She's been counting the days until school starts. Rachel knelt to the child's level. Hello, Sarah, I'm very pleased to meet you. The girl peeked up through her lashes. Do you have lots of books, Miss Holloway? I've brought some with me, Rachel smiled. And I believe more are on their way. Do you like stories? Sarah nodded eagerly. Pa reads to me sometimes, but he says a teacher will know more stories than anybody. Your pa is very wise, Rachel said, charmed by the child's enthusiasm. Perhaps you'd like to help me get the schoolroom ready today. You could be my special assistant. Sarah's face lit up. Can I, Ma? Eliza smiled gratefully at Rachel. If Miss Holloway doesn't mind, that would be wonderful. I have errands to run. We'll be just fine, Rachel assured her. Sarah can help me decide where everything should go. After Eliza left, Rachel and Sarah spent the morning cleaning the schoolroom. The child chattered happily about her family's ranch and her excitement about starting school. By midday, Rachel had learned more about Willow Creek and its inhabitants through Sarah's innocent observations than she might have discovered on her own in a week. They were arranging books on the shelves when Yates appeared in the doorway, carrying 2 wrapped parcels. "Thought you ladies might be hungry," he said, holding up the packages. "Mrs. Peterson at the cafe sends her regards and her fried chicken." "Sheriff Callahan," Sarah exclaimed, running to him. "I'm helping Miss Holloway with the school, so I see," he said, smiling down at her. "And doing a fine job of it, too." He set the food on the teacher's desk and helped Rachel arrange an impromptu picnic on the schoolhouse steps. As they ate, Sarah kept up a steady stream of conversation, moving between Rachel and Yates with the easy familiarity of a child who clearly knew and trusted the sheriff. "How do you know so much about the townspeople?" Rachel asked Yates quietly while Sarah explored the schoolyard. "Been sheriff here for 5 years," he replied. "Before that, I rode with the Rangers. You learn to read people quickly in that line of work." "Texas Rangers?" Rachel asked, impressed despite herself. "The legendary lawmen were known even in Boston," Yates nodded, "for 3 years. Came here when they needed someone who could handle the trouble that comes with frontier towns." "And was there much trouble?" "There was," he said simply. "Less now, towns growing more civilized." "Thanks to you, I imagine," Rachel said. Yates shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Thanks to people wanting something better. A proper school is part of that." As days passed, Rachel found herself increasingly drawn into the life of Willow Creek. More parents brought their children to meet her, each interaction reinforcing the town's genuine desire for education. She began to organize the schoolroom in earnest, creating lesson plans for the diverse age groups she would teach. Yates was a constant presence, stopping by the schoolhouse each day with some small offering: a repaired chair, a map he'd procured from a passing trader, once even a bouquet of desert wildflowers to brighten the room. Rachel found herself looking forward to his visits more than she cared to admit. A week after her arrival, Rachel sat on the hotel's front porch in the cool evening air, writing in her journal. She had yet to send a telegram to Boston, her decision to leave or stay still balanced on a knife's edge. "Evening, Miss Holloway," Yates's voice interrupted her thoughts. He stood at the bottom of the porch steps, hat in hand. "Hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," Rachel said, closing her journal. "Please join me." He settled into the chair beside her, and they sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. "There's to be a social at the church on Saturday," Yates finally said. "Nothing fancy, just music, dancing, and food. Thought you might like to attend, meet more of the community." "Are you asking to escort me, Sheriff?" Rachel asked, her heart quickening. "If you'd allow it," he said, his usual confidence tempered with a hint of uncertainty. Rachel smiled. "I would like that very much." The night of the social arrived, and Rachel found herself nervous as she prepared in her hotel room. She had brought only one dress suitable for such an occasion, a blue gown with lace trim that had been fashionable in Boston the previous year. Here in Willow Creek, it felt almost ostentatious, but it was the best she had. When Yates arrived to collect her, his appreciative gaze told her the dress had been the right choice. He himself looked transformed from the working sheriff she'd come to know, wearing a clean black suit with his badge polished to a high shine. "You look beautiful, Miss Holloway," he said simply. "Thank you," she replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "And please, after all this time, I think you might call me Rachel." His smile warmed his eyes. "Rachel, then." The church had been transformed for the social, with lanterns hanging from the rafters and the pews pushed back to create space for dancing. A small group of musicians played lively tunes on fiddle, guitar, and harmonica. Rachel was introduced to what felt like the entire population of Willow Creek. Everyone was welcoming, expressing their gratitude for her taking on the teaching position. She found herself laughing more than she had in months, drawn into the genuine warmth of the community. When Yates led her to the dance floor, Rachel hesitated. "I should warn you, I'm only familiar with formal Boston dances." "Then I'll have to teach you our ways," he said, taking her hand. "Just follow my lead." The dance was faster and more spirited than the controlled waltzes she knew, but Yates guided her smoothly, his hand warm and steady at her waist. Rachel found herself breathless with laughter as they twirled among the other dancers. As the evening progressed, the musicians shifted to slower tunes. Yates drew Rachel closer, their bodies moving in perfect harmony. The rest of the room seemed to fade away until there was only the music and the man before her, his eyes reflecting the lantern light. "I'm glad you decided to stay," he said softly, meant for her ears alone. "I haven't actually decided yet," she reminded him, though the words lacked conviction. "Haven't you?" Yates asked, his perceptive gaze seeing through her uncertainty. Rachel couldn't answer, caught in the moment, and the growing realization that leaving Willow Creek would mean leaving him something that suddenly seemed impossible to contemplate. The music ended, breaking the spell. Flustered, Rachel excused herself to get some air, stepping outside the church into the cool night. She leaned against the building, breathing deeply, trying to sort through her confused emotions. After a few minutes, the church door opened and Yates joined her, offering a cup of punch. "Thought you might be thirsty." "Thank you," she said, accepting the drink. It was rather warm inside. Yates nodded, not pressing her on the real reason for her hasty exit. They stood in silence, looking up at the star-filled sky. "I've never seen so many stars," Rachel marveled. "In Boston, the city lights obscure most of them." "That's one thing I love about the West," Yates said. "Makes a man feel both small and significant at the same time. Those same stars guided travelers across these lands for centuries." Rachel turned to study his profile in the moonlight. "You love it here, don't you? Despite the hardships." "I do," he admitted. "Took me a while to realize it. Spent years drifting from place to place, thinking I was just passing through. Then one day I woke up and realized Willow Creek had become home when I wasn't looking." His words resonated with something deep inside Rachel, a longing for belonging she'd never fully acknowledged to herself. "How do you know when you've found home?" she asked softly. Yates turned to face her, his expression serious. "When leaving feels impossible." The weight of his gaze made Rachel's breath catch. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, and the realization that she wanted him to was both frightening and exhilarating. The church door opened, spilling light and laughter into the night as several townspeople emerged, breaking the moment. Yates stepped back respectfully, though his eyes never left hers. "Should we return to the dancing?" he asked. "Yes," Rachel said, though part of her wished they could remain in this moment, just the two of them beneath the stars. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of dancing and conversation. When Yates finally escorted Rachel back to the hotel, they lingered at the entrance, neither quite ready to say goodnight. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," Rachel said sincerely. "The pleasure was mine," Yates replied. He hesitated, then added, "Rachel, I know you're still deciding about staying, but I want you to know that I believe you belong here. Not just for the school or the children, but—" He paused, searching for words. "But," she prompted, her heart racing. "But for all the possibilities Willow Creek holds," he finished, his meaning clear in his eyes if not fully expressed in words. Rachel nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in her throat. Yates took her hand, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles before bidding her goodnight. In her room, Rachel stood at the window, watching Yates's tall figure disappear down the street. She touched her hand where his lips had been, feeling as though something fundamental had shifted inside her. The following Monday, school officially began. Rachel stood at the door of the schoolhouse, greeting each child with a smile as they arrived. Some came on horseback, others in wagons with siblings, a few walking from town. By the time the bell rang, all 28 students were seated at their desks, faces turned expectantly toward her. Rachel took a deep breath and began. "Good morning. I'm Miss Holloway, and I'm very pleased to meet each of you. We're going to learn many things together this year." The day passed in a whirlwind of assessments, introductions, and establishing routines. Rachel was impressed by the children's eagerness to learn, even those who struggled with basic reading. By afternoon, she had a clearer sense of the challenges ahead, but felt surprisingly confident in her ability to meet them. As the children departed at day's end, Rachel noticed Yates leaning against a hitching post across the yard, watching the proceedings with evident satisfaction. She waved and he approached, helping the last few students mount their horses. "How was your first day, teacher?" he asked when the children had gone. "Exhausting," Rachel admitted with a smile, "but wonderful too, they're bright children." "They're lucky to have you," Yates said. He hesitated, then added, "I stopped by the telegraph office today. Mr. Fletcher mentioned you haven't sent any messages to Boston yet." Rachel looked down, arranging papers on her desk. "No, I haven't. May I ask why?" She met his gaze directly. "Because I'm not certain anymore what I would say." Hope flickered in Yates's eyes. "That sounds like progress." "Perhaps," Rachel acknowledged, "though I still have concerns." "Such as," Rachel gestured around the schoolroom, "I can see myself teaching here, making a difference for these children, but beyond that, this life is so different from everything I've known. The isolation, the harshness of the environment, I don't know if I'm strong enough for it." "You're stronger than you think," Yates said quietly. "I've seen it in you from the first day." He moved closer, his expression earnest. "But you're right that it's a hard land. No one should face it alone." The implication in his words made Rachel's pulse quicken. "Are you suggesting I wouldn't have to?" Before Yates could answer, a commotion outside drew their attention. Shouts from the direction of the main street broke the afternoon quiet. "Stay here," Yates ordered, his demeanor instantly shifting to that of the lawman. He strode quickly from the schoolhouse, hand resting on the revolver at his hip. Rachel watched from the doorway as he disappeared around the corner. After a few minutes of indecision, concern overcame caution, and she followed the direction he had taken. Main Street was in chaos. A group of riders' trail-worn men with hard faces had surrounded the bank. Two held rifles trained on the crowd while three more emerged from the building with canvas bags. A sixth man, clearly the leader, sat atop a large black horse, scanning the street with cold eyes. Rachel pressed herself against a building, heart pounding as she realized she was witnessing a bank robbery. Her eyes searched desperately for Yates, finding him approaching cautiously from the side, his revolver drawn. "That's far enough, Sheriff," the leader called, spotting Yates. "We're just making a withdrawal and leaving your fine town." "You know I can't let you do that, Madison," Yates replied, his voice steady despite being outgunned. The leader, Madison, laughed coldly. "Still playing the hero, Callahan? Thought you'd have learned better by now." Rachel felt a chill at the familiar way the outlaw addressed Yates. Clearly, there was history between them. "Last chance to ride away," Yates said. "Otherwise, this ends badly for you." "For one of us, certainly," Madison replied, drawing his own weapon with lightning speed. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Madison fired, the sound cracking through the air like thunder. Yates dove for cover, returning fire as he moved. The outlaw's horses reared in panic, creating confusion. Townspeople scattered, seeking safety in doorways and behind water troughs. Rachel stood frozen, terrified for Yates and everyone caught in the gunfire. When she saw Madison aim again at the spot where Yates had taken cover, she acted without thinking. Grabbing a wooden bucket from outside the building, she hurled it with all her strength at the outlaw's horse. The bucket struck the animal's flank, causing it to rear violently. Madison's shot went wild, and he struggled to control his mount. In that moment of distraction, Yates emerged from cover and fired two precise shots. One struck Madison in the shoulder, the other hit the outlaw beside him. The remaining bank robbers, seeing their leader wounded, decided to cut their losses. They fled, abandoning one of the money bags in their haste. Madison, clutching his bleeding shoulder, spurred his horse after them, leaving a trail of blood and curses. In the aftermath, Rachel rushed to Yates, who was organizing townsmen to secure the recovered money and treat a bank teller who had been struck during the robbery. "Are you hurt?" she demanded, scanning him for injuries. "I'm fine," he assured her, though his expression was grim. "You shouldn't have been out here, it was dangerous." "I was worried," Rachel said simply. "Who was that man?" Yates's jaw tightened. "Jeb Madison, leader of an outlaw gang that's been terrorizing towns across the territory. I've had run-ins with him before. He seemed to know you well." "We have history," Yates admitted. "I'll explain later. Right now, I need to organize a posse. They can't have gotten far and Madison's wounded." Rachel wanted to protest, to beg him not to pursue dangerous outlaws, but she recognized the determination in his eyes. This was his duty. Instead, she nodded and squeezed his arm briefly before stepping back. "Be careful," she said softly. His expression softened momentarily. "Always am." Then he turned to the gathering men, issuing instructions for the pursuit. Rachel returned to the schoolhouse, her mind whirling with the day's events. The peaceful routine of the classroom seemed a world away from the violence she had just witnessed. Yet it was all part of life in Willow Creek, the harsh realities alongside the community's warmth and hope. She was still there, preparing lessons for the next day with mechanical focus, when Eliza Tanner arrived to check on her. "Are you all right, Miss Holloway? We heard what happened." Eliza's concern was genuine. "I'm fine, thank you," Rachel assured her. "Just a bit shaken." Eliza nodded understandingly. "The sheriff and his men have gone after them. They're good trackers, they'll bring those outlaws to justice." "I hope so," Rachel said, unable to hide her worry, "but I fear for their safety." "Yates Callahan can handle himself," Eliza said with confidence. "He's faced worse than Jeb Madison and lived to tell the tale." "You seem very certain of that," Eliza smiled slightly. "Everyone in town knows the sheriff's reputation. Before he came to Willow Creek, he was famous for tracking down the worst outlaws in the territory. Some say he was the best ranger they ever had." This information both reassured and disturbed Rachel. The Yates she knew thoughtful, gentle with children, passionate about education seemed at odds with the formidable lawman Eliza described. "Why did he leave the Rangers?" Rachel asked. Eliza hesitated. "That's not really my story to tell, but I will say that Yates Callahan is a good man who's seen more than his share of darkness. Finding peace in Willow Creek has been his salvation." The conversation left Rachel with more questions than answers, but she kept them to herself. That night, she slept poorly, worrying about Yates and the posse pursuing dangerous men through unfamiliar territory. 2 days passed with no word. Rachel continued teaching, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for the children despite her growing concern. On the third morning, as she wrote arithmetic problems on the blackboard, a commotion outside drew her attention. "Continue practicing these sums," she instructed the class before moving to the window. The posse had returned. Dusty, exhausted men on equally tired horses made their way down the main street. At their center rode Yates, his face grim beneath the dirt and stubble of 3 days' pursuit. Behind the lawmen came 3 horses bearing bound prisoners, but only 3, not the 6 who had attempted the robbery. Rachel dismissed the class early, unable to concentrate on lessons with Yates's return. She made her way to the sheriff's office, arriving as the prisoners were being led inside. Yates saw her waiting and approached after giving instructions to his deputies. He looked exhausted, with a small cut above his eyebrow and trail dust coating his clothes. "You're back," Rachel said unnecessarily, relief making her voice tremulous. "Caught 3 of them," Yates confirmed. "The others, including Madison, crossed into Apache territory. Couldn't follow without risking a larger conflict. But you're safe," she said, resisting the urge to touch his face, to confirm for herself that he was truly standing before her, whole and alive. "I am," he agreed, a small smile briefly lightening his weary expression. "Surprised to see you waiting." "I was worried," Rachel admitted. "These past days have been difficult." Something shifted in Yates's eyes at her confession. I need to secure the prisoners and write my report, but after, would you walk with me? There are things I should explain." Rachel nodded, understanding the importance of the request. "I'll wait." It was early evening when Yates finally emerged from the sheriff's office, clean-shaven and in fresh clothes. He offered Rachel his arm, and they walked in silence toward the creek that had given the town its name. The setting sun painted the landscape in gold and amber as they reached the willow trees that lined the water. Yates led Rachel to a fallen log that served as a natural bench, and they sat side by side, listening to the gentle gurgle of the creek. "Eliza mentioned you were a famous ranger," Rachel finally said, breaking the silence. Yates grimaced. "People exaggerate. I was good at tracking, that's all." "And Jeb Madison? She said there was history there." Yates was quiet for a long moment, staring at the water. "Madison and I grew up together in a small settlement in East Texas. We were friends once, if you can believe it. Both of us orphaned young, both trying to find our way." Rachel remained silent, allowing him to continue at his own pace. "When we were 18, we both joined up with a cattle drive heading north. Somewhere along the trail, Jeb fell in with some rough men, started small gambling, fighting. By the time we reached Kansas, he joined up with an outlaw gang." Yates picked up a small stone, turning it over in his fingers. "I went back to Texas, eventually joined the Rangers. Our paths crossed again when my unit was assigned to track down Jeb's gang after they robbed a stage and killed 2 passengers. "What happened?" Rachel asked softly. "We cornered them in a canyon. In the firefight, I shot Jeb's younger brother." Yates's voice grew tight. "Didn't kill him, but he lost the use of his arm. Jeb swore he'd make me pay someday, and that's why you left the Rangers." Yates shook his head. "No, that came later. Another pursuit, another gang. We tracked them to a homestead they'd taken over. What we didn't know was that the family was still inside." His voice dropped almost to a whisper. "When the shooting started, a girl no more than 12 ran from the house, got caught in the crossfire." Rachel's hand covered his instinctively. "Oh, Yates, it wasn't my bullet that hit her," he continued. "But it didn't matter. I couldn't do it anymore after that. Couldn't reconcile the violence with what I thought I was fighting for." He looked at her directly. "That's when I came to Willow Creek. Took the sheriff's job because they needed someone, but promised myself I'd find a different way to keep the peace." "And you have," Rachel said. "Everyone speaks of how you've changed this town." "I've tried," Yates agreed. "But the past has a way of finding you, as Jeb's appearance proved." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his confession settling between them. "Thank you for telling me," Rachel finally said. "It helps me understand you better." "I wanted you to know the truth," Yates replied. "Before you decide whether to stay, this territory can be violent, unpredictable. What happened the other day wasn't unusual, just part of life here." "And you think that would make me want to leave?" Rachel asked. "Wouldn't it? You came from civilization, from safety and refinement. Here you'll face hardship and danger alongside everything else." Rachel considered his words carefully. "When I first arrived, I was certain I didn't belong here. Everything seemed too harsh, too foreign." She looked up at the darkening sky where the first stars were appearing. "But these past weeks have shown me something I never expected." "What's that?" Yates asked. "That belonging isn't about where you are, but who you're with," Rachel said softly. "I've found more genuine connection in Willow Creek than in years of Boston society." Hope kindled in Yates's eyes. "Does that mean you're staying?" "I think it does," Rachel admitted, the decision crystallizing as she spoke. "The children need me. The town has welcomed me." She gathered her courage and added, "And there are people here I've come to care for deeply." Yates took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Rachel, I know it's soon. We've known each other barely 3 weeks, but in that time I've come to feel things for you I never expected to feel for anyone." Rachel's heart raced at his words. "I feel the same," she confessed. "It frightens me how quickly it's happened." "Life moves differently out here," Yates said. "More directly, more honestly. When you face danger and hardship daily, you learn not to waste time hiding your feelings." "And what are your feelings?" Rachel asked, needing to hear the words. Yates lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. That from the moment I saw you at that window your first night here, something in me recognized something in you. That against all logic or reason, I believe you were meant to come to Willow Creek. His eyes, sincere and vulnerable, held hers. That I'm falling in love with you, Rachel Holloway, and I think I have been since the beginning. Tears pricked at Rachel's eyes. I tried so hard not to feel this way, she whispered. Told myself it was foolish, that I barely knew you, that I didn't belong in your world. And now I'm beginning to think that perhaps this is exactly where I belong. She smiled through her tears. With you. Yates cupped her cheek gently, his thumb brushing away a tear. May I kiss you, Rachel? She nodded, unable to speak past the emotion tightening her throat. Yates leaned forward, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that began tenderly but quickly deepened with all the feelings they'd been holding back. Rachel's hands found their way to his shoulders, drawing him closer as she returned the kiss with equal fervor. When they finally parted, both breathless, Yates rested his forehead against hers. I've been wanting to do that since the social, he admitted. I've been wanting you to, Rachel replied with a small laugh. They stayed by the creek until the stars fully emerged, talking about their pasts, their hopes, the future they might build together. As the night air grew cooler, Yates draped his coat around Rachel's shoulders and reluctantly suggested they return to town. People will talk if we're gone too long, he said with a rueful smile. Let them, Rachel replied, but allowed him to help her to her feet. They walked back hand in hand, their path lit by moonlight. At the hotel, Yates kissed her once more, gently but with promise, before bidding her good night. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Rachel's life. She threw herself into teaching with renewed purpose, developing creative ways to engage her diverse group of students. The town responded to her enthusiasm, donations of books and supplies appearing regularly at the schoolhouse door. Yates courted her properly, taking her on rides through the surrounding countryside, introducing her to the beauty of the desert landscape. They attended church together on Sundays, no longer hiding their growing attachment. The townspeople watched their romance unfold with approving smiles, many commenting that it was about time their sheriff found happiness. 1 month after her arrival in Willow Creek, Rachel finally sent a telegram to Boston not to resign her position, but to request her remaining belongings be shipped west. The decision felt right, a confirmation of the new life she was building. That evening, Yates took her to dinner at the hotel's small restaurant, more formal than their usual meetings. He seemed unusually nervous, adjusting his collar and repeatedly checking his pocket. Is everything all right? Rachel asked after watching him fidget through the main course. Perfect, Yates assured her, though his smile was tense. Just thinking. About what? He reached across the table to take her hand. About how quickly life can change. 2 months ago, I was resigned to being alone, focused only on my duty to this town. Then a stagecoach arrived with a Boston schoolteacher who looked like she'd landed on another planet. Rachel laughed. I was terrified. Everything seemed so alien, so harsh. And now I see the beauty alongside the harshness, she said honestly. The strength of the people, the community they've built against all odds, the possibilities this place holds. Yates nodded, his expression serious. That's what I love about you, Rachel, your ability to see beyond surface appearances to the heart of things. He took a deep breath. I had a whole speech planned, but I'm finding words inadequate. For what? Rachel asked, though her racing heart suggested she already knew. Instead of answering directly, Yates reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. From it, he produced a ring, a simple gold band set with a modest diamond that caught the lamplight. It was my mother's, he explained, his voice rough with emotion. The only thing of value I have from my past. I've carried it with me all these years, waiting for the right person to give it to. Rachel's breath caught as he slid from his chair to one knee beside her, heedless of the restaurant's other patrons who had fallen silent, watching the scene unfold. Rachel Holloway, I know we've known each other a short time by some standards, but in that time, you've become essential to me. Your courage, your compassion, your willingness to embrace a life so different from what you knew, all of it has made me love you more than I thought possible. Yates held up the ring. I'm asking you to build a life here with me, to face whatever comes together. Will you marry me? Tears blurred Rachel's vision as she nodded, unable to speak immediately. When she found her voice, it was clear and certain. Yes, Yates, yes, I will marry you. The restaurant erupted in cheers and applause as Yates slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, a kiss that held the promise of their future together. The news of their engagement spread through Willow Creek like wildfire. The following day, Rachel's students presented her with handmade cards of congratulation, and women of the town immediately began planning the wedding, suggesting dates and offering to help with preparations. They've decided on next month, Rachel told Yates that evening as they sat on the schoolhouse steps. Apparently, that's when the traveling circuit judge will be in town, and Mrs. Peterson insists it's the perfect time because the wildflowers will be blooming in the valley. Yates laughed. Does that suit you? We can wait longer if you prefer. Rachel considered the question seriously. A month ago, I would have thought it scandalously quick, but now. She looked at the ring on her finger, still unfamiliar but feeling increasingly right. Now I find I don't want to wait. Life is uncertain here, you've shown me that. I want to begin our life together. Yates's smile was tender as he drew her close. Then next month it is. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of preparation. Yates began construction on a small house at the edge of town, close enough for Rachel to walk to the school, but with views of the open desert she had come to appreciate. The women of Willow Creek helped Rachel sew a wedding dress, adapting one of her Boston gowns with lace and ribbon donated from precious personal supplies. 2 days before the wedding, Rachel was supervising the children's afternoon recess when a stagecoach rumbled into town, an unexpected arrival, as the regular stage wasn't due until the following week. Curious, she watched as it stopped in front of the hotel. The door opened and a well-dressed couple emerged, looking around with evident confusion. The woman, elegant in a traveling suit that screamed Eastern fashion, spotted Rachel and hurried toward the schoolyard. "Rachel, is that you?" she called, waving. Rachel's mouth fell open in shock as she recognized her mother and father. "Mother, father, what are you doing here?" Emily Holloway embraced her daughter, holding her at arm's length to examine her. "When we received your letter saying you were getting married, did you think we wouldn't come? Though I must say, your father nearly had apoplexy at the idea of you marrying a man you've known less than 2 months. Rachel glanced at her father, who stood awkwardly nearby, looking distinctly out of place in his Boston attire. "It was quite a journey," he said stiffly. "I hope we're not too late for this hasty celebration." "No, the wedding is day after tomorrow," Rachel said, still stunned by their appearance. She turned to her students who were watching with undisguised curiosity. "Children, please continue with your games. I need to speak with my parents." Rachel led her parents to the schoolhouse, acutely aware of the gulf between the world they represented and the life she had embraced. Inside, she offered them the only chairs available, her own desk chair and a student's desk that her father could barely fit into. "I can't believe you came all this way," Rachel said, still processing their arrival. "Of course we came," her mother said. "Though I must say your letter was quite a shock. Last we heard, you were uncertain about remaining here at all, and then suddenly you're marrying the local sheriff." "It happened rather quickly," Rachel admitted, "but I've never been more certain of anything." Her father harumphed. "Rachel, be reasonable. You barely know this man. How can you possibly be sure he's suitable? We know nothing about his family, his background." "I know everything that matters," Rachel replied with quiet confidence. "Yates is honorable, kind, respected by everyone in this community. He's made a life here through his own efforts, not through inheritance or connection." "But to marry so hastily," her mother protested. "What will people think?" Rachel smiled, recognizing the Boston society concerns that once would have swayed her. Out here, people think it's sensible to recognize love when you find it and not waste time with unnecessary formalities. Before her parents could respond, the schoolhouse door opened and Yates entered. He had clearly heard about the stagecoach's arrival and deduced who the passengers might be. He removed his hat as he approached, his manner respectful but confident. "Mr. and Mrs. Holloway, I presume," he said, extending his hand to Rachel's father. "Yates Callahan, I'm very pleased to meet you." Thomas Holloway stood, reluctantly taking the offered hand. "Sheriff Callahan, I understand you intend to marry my daughter." "Yes, sir, with your blessing if possible." "Without it if necessary," Yates added, his tone polite but firm. "Though I hope it won't come to that." Rachel moved to stand beside Yates, taking his hand in a clear display of unity. "Mother, father, I love Yates and I'm going to marry him. I hope you can be happy for us." Emily Holloway studied her daughter's face, noting the certainty there. "You truly love him. This isn't some reaction to the exotic environment." "I truly love him," Rachel confirmed. "And I've found a place here, a purpose. The children need me and I need them. I've never felt more useful or more myself than I do teaching in this schoolhouse." Thomas Holloway looked between his daughter and the tall sheriff, his expression softening slightly. "You seem different, Rachel, more assured." "I am," she said simply. "Willow Creek has changed me for the better, I think." Yates squeezed her hand before addressing her parents again. "I know this is unexpected, and that I'm not the sort of man you likely envisioned for your daughter. But I promise you that I love Rachel and will spend my life trying to make her happy. If you'll allow it, I'd like to show you our town, help you understand why she's chosen to make her life here." After a moment's hesitation, Thomas nodded. "I suppose that would be appropriate, considering we've come all this way." The next day, Yates took Rachel's parents on a tour of Willow Creek. He showed them the nearly completed house he was building, introduced them to townspeople who spoke warmly of Rachel's impact on their children, and even arranged for them to attend a special recitation by Rachel's students, demonstrating the progress they had made under her tutelage. By evening, Rachel could see her parents' attitudes shifting. They still looked out of place in their Eastern finery, but they were making an effort to understand the community that had embraced their daughter. At dinner in the hotel, Thomas Holloway finally addressed Yates directly. "Sheriff Callahan, while I still believe this marriage is proceeding with unseemly haste, I can see that my daughter has made her choice." He cleared his throat. "And I must acknowledge that she appears happy, happier than I've seen her in some time." "Thank you, sir," Yates replied. "I intend to ensure she remains so." "Then you have our blessing," Thomas said formally, though his expression remained reserved. "Though I would appreciate knowing more about your background, your family." Yates nodded, and over dessert, he shared the basics of his history: his parents' early deaths, his education by his mother, his time with the Rangers, and ultimately his decision to build a life in Willow Creek. He spoke honestly but tactfully, neither hiding the harsher aspects of his past nor dwelling on them unnecessarily. When he finished, Emily Holloway reached across the table to pat his hand. "You've had quite a journey, Sheriff. I believe you when you say you'll take care of our Rachel." "Thank you, Mrs. Holloway," Yates said, genuine gratitude in his voice. "And please call me Yates." The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the desert spring offering a rare display of wildflowers that dotted the landscape with color. The small church was filled beyond capacity, with many townspeople standing outside the open windows to witness the ceremony. Rachel wore her adapted Boston gown, now transformed with lace trim, and a veil made from the netting that had once adorned her mother's own wedding ensemble. Emily Holloway had worked alongside the town women to complete the alterations, finding unexpected common ground in the shared task. Thomas Holloway, looking more comfortable in the borrowed suit Yates had procured for him, waited to walk his daughter down the aisle. When Rachel appeared at the church door, he blinked rapidly, clearly emotional at the sight of his daughter as a bride. "You look beautiful," he said gruffly. "Are you certain about this, Rachel? There's still time to reconsider." Rachel smiled, touching her father's cheek gently. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Thomas nodded, accepting her decision at last. "Then let's not keep your sheriff waiting." The ceremony was simple but deeply meaningful. Yates stood tall and proud at the altar, his eyes never leaving Rachel as she walked toward him on her father's arm. When the circuit judge asked who gave this woman in marriage, Thomas's voice was clear and strong as he replied, "Her mother and I do." Yates and Rachel exchanged traditional vows, their voices steady and sure. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Yates kissed Rachel with a tenderness that brought tears to many eyes, including, surprisingly, those of Thomas Holloway. The celebration that followed was unlike anything Rachel's parents had experienced, a joyous community gathering with music, dancing, and enough food to feed the town twice over. Children ran playing between the adults, dogs wandered freely, and as night fell, lanterns were lit, creating a magical atmosphere. Rachel found a moment alone with her parents as the festivities continued. "Thank you for coming," she said, embracing them both. "It means everything to have you here." "We wouldn't have missed it," her mother said, wiping away a tear. "Though I wish you weren't going to be so far away." "You'll visit again," Rachel promised, "and perhaps someday we'll journey to Boston." Thomas cleared his throat. "Your mother and I have been discussing that, actually. We thought perhaps we might extend our stay at least for a few weeks, if that wouldn't inconvenience you and Yates." He still stumbled slightly over the familiar address. Rachel's face lit up. "Really? You'd stay?" "Well, your mother has become quite interested in this Western gardening, Mrs. Peterson was describing," Thomas explained. "And I find I'm curious about the mining operations Mr. Gibbs mentioned. Purely from an investment perspective, you understand." Rachel saw through the excuses to the truth. Her parents were making an effort to understand her new life, perhaps even to find their own connection to it. "We'd love to have you stay," she said sincerely. Later, as Rachel danced with her new husband beneath the stars, she told him of her parents' decision to extend their visit. "Your father's warming to me," Yates observed with a smile. "He almost managed to say my name without wincing," Rachel laughed. "Give him time, Mother already adores you." "And you?" Yates asked, drawing her closer. "Any regrets, Mrs. Callahan?" The new name sent a thrill through Rachel. "Not one," she assured him, "though I do have one confession." "Oh, remember that first day when I told you I didn't belong here?" Rachel smiled up at her husband. "I was wrong. I believe I've belonged here all along, I just didn't know it until I met you." Yates's eyes softened with love. "You belong with me," he said simply, echoing the words he'd first spoken weeks ago. "And I belong with you, wherever that may be." "For now, it's right here," Rachel said, gesturing to the celebrating town around them. "Building something together." "For always," Yates corrected gently, leaning down to kiss his wife beneath the vast canopy of stars that had guided them both to this moment, this place. This love that would sustain them through all the challenges and joys of their life together in the wild, beautiful West. 5 years later, Rachel stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching as Yates taught their 3-year-old son Thomas how to gently pet a new foal in the corral. Their daughter Emily, just turned 1, was balanced on Rachel's hip, her small hand reaching out toward the golden sunset that painted the desert in familiar, beloved hues. Willow Creek had grown in those 5 years. A new hotel had been built. The school had expanded to 2 rooms with a second teacher to help Rachel, and a proper doctor had finally settled in town. Rachel's parents visited yearly, staying for increasingly longer periods each time. Thomas Holloway had even invested in several local businesses, helping the town's prosperity. Life wasn't always easy. The desert remained harsh, winters could be brutal, and the occasional outlaw still passed through. But Rachel had never regretted her decision to stay, to build a life with Yates in this place that had become more home to her than Boston ever was. As though sensing her thoughts, Yates looked up and caught her eye across the yard. His smile, still capable of making her heart race after all this time, held the same love and certainty she'd seen on their wedding day. "Mama," little Thomas called, "come see the baby horse." "In a moment, sweetheart," Rachel replied, shifting Emily to her other hip. Yates crossed to join her on the porch, taking their daughter into his arms. "What are you thinking about, looking so serious?" he asked, brushing a kiss against Rachel's temple. "Just remembering," she said, leaning against his solid warmth. "That first day, how sure I was that I didn't belong here." Yates chuckled. "And now look at you, the most respected teacher in the county, with half the town's children named after you." "After us," Rachel corrected, thinking of the 3 little Yates and 4 Rachels currently enrolled in her school. "We've built something good here, haven't we?" "The best," Yates agreed, his arm tightening around her waist as they watched their son's delight with the foal. "And we're just getting started." Rachel turned her face up to his, finding in his eyes the same promise that had drawn her to him from the beginning, of strength, of honesty, of a love that had only deepened with each passing day. "I love you, Yates Callahan," she said softly. "And I love you, Rachel Callahan," he replied, the words as true now as they had been the first time he'd spoken them by the Willow Creek. "Always have, always will." As the sun sank below the horizon, and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Rachel knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be in this wild, beautiful place, with this good, brave man, building a future bright with promise and possibility. She had found her belonging, her purpose, her home not in a place, but in the love that had claimed her heart that long ago day when a girl from Boston had said, "I don't belong here," and a cowboy sheriff had answered, "You belong with me."